It's blinking, that means it's going.
Yeah.
Correct, you're on camera.
Great. Hi, Gary Weber. We are.
Hi, Jack.
Hi. We are on this conference toward a science of consciousness in Tucson, 2012, and we're pretty much in the same ballpark. And why I am very grateful that we can make this interview is that you have come sort of to the end of the road, or to the goal of where I am aiming. You mentioned yesterday at breakfast that you're not thinking anymore, and I was curious, how is it not being thinking? How can you sort of be active and do stuff that is good?
As we talked yesterday, it was a big surprise when this happened 14 years ago. I had a big corporate job, senior vice president, 1,000 people, $250 million budget, 4 research labs, and I suddenly had no thoughts. And so immediately it was, a little energy arose. Now you've done it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go through my morning routine, went off to work, and lo and behold, nobody even noticed. So that must say something about corporate leadership.
Okay.
You can have no thoughts and at the same time function, and nobody notices.
Yeah.
But I was surprised that speech emerges, insights emerge out of no place. There's just emptiness, and at the right time, the right thing just seems to come up.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you don't encode the information. If you're going to a big, complicated presentation, you still read the exhibits, read all the financials, read all the reports. You come to the meeting, you just come to the meeting empty. As always, it stays empty. And you just wait. And amazingly, some really surprisingly good, better than I could have ever done, insights happen. They just appear.
Okay.
You can feel them arising, and you just say them, and it's all taken care of. It was a big surprise to me.
That must mean that you have a lot of stored information already, of course, that you can act from, and that you have good access to it in this mood.
True, but this was new information. I mean, I had, this was read the information before you come to the meeting.
Yeah.
And the meeting was about the information. So I had just read it the day before, or the night before.
Yeah.
And I come to the meeting, and somehow, amazingly, it got assembled and organized. And if a question arose in the meeting, an unexpected question, often the surprising, synergistic answer would come forth.
Okay.
That was far smarter than I could ever have been, and it made you look like the smartest person in the room.
Okay.
Smarter than what I was.
Okay, nice.
You're also the smartest person in the room. You look like it. No, I wasn't. You look like it because you're there 100%.
Uh-huh.
There's nothing else taking your bandwidth, dragging you off to someplace else. You're just there.
And in my terminology, that would mean not so much fear.
Yeah. The fear goes away. I mean, fear goes away, self-referential desires go away, and the ongoing self-referential narrative just stops. I mean, as we talked before, I got turned on to deconstructing the I. I've been told this was really the key to happiness, and so I just set about doing that with a lot of Zen work and yoga work and different practices, and eventually it happened. There was experiences along the way, but there was this one that was fundamentally changed, was I was doing a yoga routine. I'd done 1,000 times before, literally, thousands of times before. And just in the middle of it, my thoughts just stopped.
Oh, okay.
And so it's a big surprise. But it worked. The thesis worked. If you deconstruct the I, you can stop self-referential narrative thought.
But you are pretty unique. So there has been...
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Still, but there's been research around your experiences, and what was that about?
Well, I was fortunate about that same time that a lot of cognitive neuroscience came online. We had much better tools. This is a 40-year-long process till now. And
It's 40 years since it happened?
well, no, 40 years since I began meditating. I
Okay,
had a big experience and started it,
Yeah.
and then I meditated for 25 years.
Okay.
And then the experience happened, and that's been 14 years since then. So, but the good information and the good tools came online about the same time this page turned for me. And so we had lots of tools to work with to try to understand it. Because I didn't understand, there was nobody around me that understood how it happened. But yet, in all those traditions, all the Indian traditions and in Zen, which I spent a lot of time with, this is very much where they're headed. They say that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
It's just, unfortunately, not many people get there so far.
No.
We're trying to change that. And as I mentioned, I'm a subject in 5 studies. We're trying to find, I think we've got a good handle on how this happened. Now we're looking back at it and seeing other people meditate, how different parts of this selfing network come onto being, and how they manifest, and how they create our fears, our desires, and our narrative about them.
And the way that it's been studied is it's through brain scans or some neurological investigations. Or
Yes, fMRI has been a big tool.
Yeah.
I mean, really, we have a lot of high-strength magnets with a very good specificity. The centers we're looking for right now and working with, I'm very heavily involved in a project at Yale. We need to look for a very tiny, they call it 3 voxels, a very small area that's involved in the selfing network of one of the key nodes. It's a very
selfing, in the what? In the selfing?
Selfing network.
What is that?
Well, the network, there's a good paper out of Harvard in 2010, Andrews Hanna, that looks at this and finds out that there are 2 main switching centers, control centers, in the selfing network.
Selfing network?
Selfing network.
Making up the self.
Making up the self.
Concept, yeah.
Yeah, and there are also 9 other centers that are associated with these 2 main centers.
Okay.
And so one side of that is self and other. And if that side shuts down, then the other goes away, and there's nothing but oneness. Everything is one thing. The other side, which is self in time, shuts down, then there's only now, because there is no sense of you being an entity moving through time. So if you can shut down the good news, if you can shut down the key centers, then the whole thing falls apart.
But can you function then?
I passed for functioning.
Okay, so that happened to you in all those centers?
But at the time, 14 years ago, we had nothing to know that.
No.
But now when we look at this brain, in fact, it shut down. I mean,
Okay.
That key center is shut down.
But you still accumulate memories, even though you're in the now.
But there are different kinds of memories. The kind of memories that don't get stored.
No, please, I'm not finished yet. Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay.
The kind of memories that don't get stored are the self-referential ones. The episodic, autobiographical memories.
Okay.
The other kind of information, like learning facts that don't have a self in them, unimpeded. That's the good news, because you can learn information that doesn't require selfing. If you ask to me, how do I get to the interstate, or how do I get to the main highway? There's an I in that because we language it in.
Yeah.
Our languages are subject-object based.
Yeah.
But there's no sense of Jack being in there, needing to go to the highway.
No.
They're just, trying to find the directions. So that's not an autobiographical, heavily emotionally loaded episodic memory. It's just information. There's no content to it that has an I, a self in it. And so the brain, fortunately, can differentiate those.
Okay, good. Have you looked into psychological interpretations of in this research work?
The only thing that's been done is a fellow named Jeffrey Martin did his doctoral thesis. He started with 500 people who reported periods of long stillness, or whatever words you want to use, and picked 52 out of those, and out of those 36 of us actually were in the study. And he looked at psychological development. There's a Washington University sentence completion test, which is kind of the gold standard for coming up with psychological development. It's a 1 to 10 scale. And so we had the test. We took the test, and he gives all kinds of screening and follow-up questions and interviews and everything else to come to this, to evaluate us. And not surprisingly, all of the 36 of us were over 5. Not a surprise, because he already cut it down 90%, so it wasn't an open population for the whole world. Average was 7.14 on 1 to 10 scale.
Okay. In what aspect?
Ego development, but not ego in the way we think about it. 10 is unit of consciousness.
So 10 is?
10 is like unit of consciousness.
Okay.
And only one of us, I was only one, was a 10. And the rest of the people were between 5 and 10.
Okay.
So they were different places along this scale, but they weren't, we all didn't score 8.73, for example. There was a range. So within the people who report this illness for fairly long times, there was a range of psychological development. So if you look at people, you could say, well, you couldn't pick the people out in a crowd. We don't stand out any, there's no way you can look at us in a crowd and tell.
No.
So that was one test.
Yeah.
A second one, maybe not so psychological, is a mystical test. There's a Hood mysticism scale that was developed, and he was on Jeffrey Martin's doctoral committee, and they gave us that test too, just how mystical are you guys. And this scale went up to 160. And it turns out that 9 of us were the top of the scale on 160, as mystical as you can be.
Okay.
And you took the average of the bunch of us, and we still scored 152 by average. And even psychedelic people only scored 150. Psychotics, like 145 or something like that. Contemplative, someplace in the 140s. But surprisingly, non-dual people score the same kind of mysticism level as psychedelic people do. And we've got some good data coming out now, not out of our center, but out of the UK, that supports this, that the way the serotogenetic, the psychedelics that work by serotonin suppression or inaction, which would be LSD, ayahuasca, magic mushroom, psilocybin, that they operate the same way, that they actually shut down these centers we were talking about. They deactivate these 2 main centers. And so it's not surprising that they see pretty much the same mystical situations that we see, because that's what the meditation does. Shuts down the same 2 centers.
So we are in the way of ourselves.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the good news is if you get rid of yourself, it's so much better. I mean, everything is so much better. And yet you still completely function. You still take care of your children. You still feed. You still can work.
Is it Jack Kornfield that wrote about every peak experience people, all of them, sort of, they're there for a while and then they get back to normal standards? You heard about him?
Oh, I know Jack Kornfield.
Yeah.
But I don't agree with that, obviously.
Okay, no.
And that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing behind the persistent, non-symbolic people, is they spend much of their time in this space. And for me to have basically no thoughts, and that spends most of my time is in this mystical space. And so I see you in a mystical way. And I can't even really clearly recall what it used to be like. But seeing you now, I see you not as a discrete thing. No. I mean, I can recognize Jack. I can recognize Jack's clothing and beard and his eyeglasses. But at the same time, you can see that everything, cliche, is all one thing. And not just philosophically, but that's your direct, personal, ongoing experience. That this is an illusion. It's in a way I could have never imagined it would be. But it is true. You think guys must be crazy. But the whole thing can be seen to be an illusion, even as you in the play with it. It's there. Strange, curious, yes, I know. But
if as I'm interested in sustainability,
yes,
would you have any comment to that specific subject?
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, I think we have to change our operating paradigm. We have to get out of being egos with endless desires, endless needs, endless problems, endless narrative. If we can we can just somehow get an awareness that it's possible to reconstruct our egoic nature in a way that we can live differently. We can live more holistically, not because we're forced into it, but because we just don't have the same desires and needs and problems.
And we were talking about that is about transcending and including. It's not fighting the ego.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's sort of including what good it has done to us,
Right.
and then take on the next level of consciousness and self-image.
Exactly. And I think these egos probably developed 300,000 to 400,000 years ago, best we can determine. And they developed probably out of communication, that you and I began to trade symbols back and forth. And eventually we developed ways to talk about, well, there's a zebra over there that you might have part of. And in doing that, we languaged that. As we languaged it, we got into subject and object. And so it then became, then I've got a language. I'll start word symbols filled in, and then we started talking to ourselves, and we generated this egoic structure.
But also, wherever there is two, there is fear. It
Yes.
says in the Upanishads.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Separation is
Separation is-
where fear starts.
Yes, yes. And so if everything's one thing, then your ongoing visceral fear goes away. That doesn't mean you're unprotected, because you actually respond faster, more appropriately than when you were going around watching for lions in the bushes. I mean, the lions are gone.
Yeah.
The lions are now imaginary for the most part, or projected. So if you don't have those, then fear drops away. And you can live a much richer, fuller life.
And have a lot of sustainable rock and roll.
Exactly.
That's my image, my metaphor.
Yeah, well, rock and roll turns you on. You may find that in fact, rock and roll, it may or may not turn you on like it did before.
Oh, it's rather salsa.
Sort of what?
It's salsa that I
no,
really
yeah,
like.
Exactly. So salsa then, whatever. But you may find you like it more or less.
Yeah.
But at
Well,
least,
yeah.
but the selfing part comes out of it.
Yeah.
There's no investiture in that particular anything. That doesn't mean pleasures don't come. In fact, maybe surprisingly, without a self there, the peak pleasures are even better. What you don't have, because there's nothing's interfering with them. There's no bandwidth being taken up by thinking about something else while the pleasure is taking place.
But you have a lot of humor, and humor to me is when we connect to truth and to the oneness of it all. So you have an awareness of separation in my interpretation of what happens. Because I mean, if we don't see the sort of the separation that gets overbridged by humor, we wouldn't laugh.
Yeah.
No, so
I don't know how that happens.
So, but
I'm as mystified about it as you are. I really, there's nothing, it's empty inside. And I'm surprised at what comes out.
Yeah.
There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that says, Naiva kinchit kauramiti ito, what comes out, Pashyan, Shrinvan, Sprishan, Jigvan, Ashnan, Gachan, Svapan. It says, I do nothing at all. This is what the wise ones say, it's first line. Then it goes through and lists all the things that you don't do. And the first part of the third line is speaking. And in fact, you don't do speaking. I don't have any, I have no sense of ownership of speaking. I'm amazed at what comes out.
Okay, yeah.
It's surprising to me, as it is to you. I have no idea where it comes from. I have no idea how it gets constructed.
Life lives you.
Life lives me. Life lives itself.
Yeah.
It just expresses. You just get the hell out. Pardon me. You just get out of the way. You just get out of the way. It's surprising. Life can pretty well do itself.
Yeah.
Better than what we can do it. We just have to let go and get out of the way.
Gary,
Jack.
thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.